I was running through Discovery Park at sunset, calling my dog's name through tears and growing panic, when a man emerged from the tree line carrying my golden retriever like he was made of glass instead of 80 pounds of stubborn muscle. What stopped me dead in my tracks wasn't just the relief of seeing Charlie safe, it was the way this stranger was holding him, with the kind of careful tenderness that suggested he understood exactly how much losing him would have destroyed me. "Charlie," I gasped, stumbling over roots and uneven ground to reach them. The man was tall, probably early 40s, with weathered hands and the kind of quiet presence that suggested he spent more time with trees than people. But his eyes, dark and serious and infinitely kind, were focused entirely on me, with an intensity that made my heart skip for reasons that had nothing to do with running. "He's okay," the man said, his voice rough with what sounded like cigarettes and too many years of not talking to enough people. "Found him about half a mile north, caught in some blackberry bushes. He's got a few scratches, but nothing serious." He handed Charlie over to me carefully, our fingers brushing during the transfer in a way that sent electricity up my arms. If you're enjoying this story, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell. It really helps the channel grow. "Thank you," I breathed, burying my face in Charlie's fur and feeling the solid warmth of him against my chest. I thought I'd lost him forever. "He's never run off like that before. I don't know what happened." "Dogs get spooked," the man said simply. "Could have been anything. A sound, a smell, another animal. The important thing is, he's safe." I looked up at him through my tears, trying to read the expression on his face. He was watching me with Charlie with something that looked almost like longing, like he was remembering something precious he'd lost. "I'm Emma," I said, realizing I was still clutching Charlie like a lifeline. "Emma Walsh. And this is Charlie." "I know." The words sent a chill down my spine. "You know?" "His collar. Has his name and your phone number." The man's smile was slight, self-deprecating. "I'm not psychic, just observant." "Right, of course." Heat crept up my neck. "I'm sorry, I'm not thinking clearly. What's your name?" "David. David Chen." He gestured toward a park ranger uniform shirt hanging from a nearby tree branch. "I work here. Maintenance mostly, but I help with search and rescue when needed." "You're a park ranger." Something like that. There was weight in those words, stories I couldn't read in the careful way he held his shoulders. "Emma, can I ask you something?" "Anything." "You just saved my dog." The note in his collar. The one tucked behind his ID tag. "Did you write that?" My blood went cold. The note! I'd forgotten about the note. 3 months ago, during the worst of my depression after my father's sudden death, I'd written a letter to myself and tucked it into Charlie's collar. It was meant to be a reminder of why I needed to keep going, why Charlie needed me to stay alive, even when staying alive felt impossible. The letter contained my darkest thoughts, my most desperate moments, things I'd never told another living soul. "You read it," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "I'm sorry, I was looking for emergency contact information and it fell out. I couldn't help but," David trailed off, running a hand through his graying hair. "Emma, are you okay?" That's a complicated question. Most important questions are. I set Charlie down, keeping hold of his leash, and really looked at David for the first time. He was handsome in a weathered, lived-in way, with lines around his eyes that suggested he'd seen more than his share of difficult things. But there was something in his expressiona recognition, a understanding that made me think he'd read my note and seen something familiar in it. "Why did you keep it?" I asked. "The note, I mean. You could have just put it back." "Because it was the most honest thing I'd read in years. And because..." He paused, looking out toward the sound. "Because I recognized the feeling." "What feeling?" "Like you're going through the motions of living without actually feeling alive. Like you're holding on because someone or something depends on you, but you've forgotten how to hold on for yourself." The accuracy of his observation hit me like a physical blow. "David..." "I'm sorry, I shouldn't have said that. Your note, your feelings, they're none of my business." "No, it's actually a relief to hear someone say it out loud." I sat down on a nearby log, suddenly exhausted. Nobody talks about it, you know. Grief. Real grief, not the sanitized version people are comfortable with. Everyone wants you to be healing and moving forward and honoring his memory by living your best life. And instead, you're just trying to make it through each day without falling apart completely. Exactly. I looked up at him, this stranger who somehow understood the weight I'd been carrying alone for months. How do you know? David was quiet for a long moment, staring at his hands. Because I've been there. Different circumstances, same feeling. What happened? Afghanistan. Lost most of my unit in an IED explosion. Spent 2 years in military hospitals, another 3 trying to figure out how to live with survivors' guilt and PTSD. He looked at me directly. Took me a long time to learn that just because you're breathing doesn't mean you're living. Is that why you work here? In the park? Partly. Nature doesn't ask questions, doesn't expect you to perform being okay when you're not. Trees don't judge you for having a panic attack on a Tuesday afternoon. And the other part? I'm good at finding things that are lost. His smile was sad, self-aware. Dogs, hikers who've wandered off trail, people who've forgotten how to find their way back to themselves. I felt tears starting again, but not the panic tears from losing Charlie. These were different relief, recognition, the strange comfort of being seen by someone who understood. David, can I ask you something personal? Fair trade. I read your personal note. Do you still struggle with the depression, the feeling like you're just going through the motions? Some days, but less than I used to. Finding Charlie today, seeing how much you love him, reading your note. He paused. It reminded me that there are still good things worth protecting in this world. And what made the difference between just surviving and actually living? Honest answer, time, therapy. Learning that healing isn't linear, that having bad days doesn't erase the progress you've made. He looked at me with an intensity that made my breath catch. And occasionally meeting someone who reminds you what it feels like to want to be fully present for something. The weight of his words settled between us like a promise. Charlie, oblivious to the emotional undercurrents, was sniffing around the base of a Douglas fir, completely content now that his adventure was over. Emma, David said carefully, this might be presumptuous, but would you like to walk with me? I know these trails better than anyone, and Charlie might enjoy exploring somewhere safe. What would you do if you were in my place? Tell me in the comments. I looked at him, this man who'd appeared in my life like some kind of guardian angel with his own collection of scars, who'd read my most vulnerable words and responded with understanding instead of judgment. I'd like that, I said. But David, I need you to know something. What's that? I'm not looking for someone to fix me. I'm barely figuring out how to fix myself. Good. I'm not looking for a project to work on. I'm looking for someone who understands that being broken doesn't make you less worthy of connection. We walked the northern trails as the sun set over Puget Sound, Charlie trotting happily between us like he'd orchestrated this entire meeting. David showed me hidden viewpoints and told me stories about the park's history, about the wildlife he monitored, about the small daily miracles that had slowly taught him to appreciate being alive. You're different than I expected, I said as we paused at an overlook where the city lights were just beginning to twinkle below us. Different? How? Most people either avoid talking about difficult things completely, or they want to fix you with platitudes and positive thinking. You're not doing either. What am I doing? Just being present, letting the difficult things exist without trying to minimize them or solve them. David leaned against the railing, looking out at the water. I learned that from grief counseling. Sometimes the most helpful thing you can do for someone is just witness their pain without trying to take it away. Did it help, the counseling? Eventually, took me 3 tries to find a therapist who understood that military trauma doesn't respond well to generic self-help advice. He glanced at me sideways. Are you seeing anyone? Professionally, I mean? I was. Had to stop when my insurance changed and I couldn't afford the copays anymore. There are sliding scale options. Community centers, graduate programs that need supervised hours. You seem to know a lot about mental health resources. I volunteer at the VA sometimes, help other vets navigate the system, find services they need. David turned to face me fully. Emma, what you wrote in that note. About feeling like you're disappointing your father by not being able to move on. You remember that specifically? I remember all of it. And I need you to know that grief isn't something you move on from. It's something you learn to carry differently. Tears started sliding down my cheeks again. Everyone keeps telling me he'd want me to be happy. but I can't figure out how to be happy when he's not here to see it. Maybe the happiness isn't the point right now. Maybe the point is just learning to be okay with being alive, even when it's hard. Is that enough? Just being okay with being alive? It's everything. It's the foundation that everything else gets built on. David, I said as we started walking back toward the parking area, can I see you again? Not as a patient or a project, just as someone who gets it? I'd like that. But Emma, I need to be honest about something. What? I'm attracted to you. Not just your honesty or your vulnerability, but you. The person who loves her dog enough to write herself a lifeline and tuck it in his collar. The person who's brave enough to keep going even when going feels impossible. My heart started racing. David, you're 20 years older than me. 19, but who's counting? People would think. People always think something. Question is, what do you think? I stopped walking and looked at him, really looked. At the way he'd held Charlie like something precious, the way he'd read my darkest thoughts and responded with compassion instead of judgment, the way he was offering me understanding without trying to fix me. I think, I said slowly, that you're the first person in months who's made me feel like being alive might actually be worthwhile. And how does that feel? Scary and wonderful. And like maybe not everything good is in the past. He kissed me then, soft and careful and tasting like hope, and the kind of future I'd forgotten to believe in. When we broke apart, Charlie was sitting at our feet, tail wagging like he approved of this development. So what happens now? I asked. Now we take it one day at a time, figure out what this is when we're both ready to figure it out. And if I have bad days, if the depression comes back full force and I'm not good company, then you have bad days, and I try to remind you that bad days don't last forever. And if people judge us for the age difference, for the way we met, then they judge us. But Emma, I've spent too many years being afraid of what other people think to let it stop me from pursuing something that feels this right. Have you ever found unexpected healing through connecting with someone who truly understood your struggles? Share your story in the comments. 6 months later, I'm writing this from the cabin David and I rented near the park for the weekend, watching him teach Charlie to fetch sticks while the sun sets over the water. The depression still comes and goes. Healing isn't linear, like he said, but now I have someone who understands that loving someone with mental illness means showing up for the hard days as much as the good ones. I still have that note, the one David found in Charlie's collar, but now it lives in a frame on our bedside table, not as a reminder of my darkest moment, but as proof that sometimes losing something you love leads you to finding something you didn't know you needed. And sometimes the person who saves your dog ends up saving you too. If stories about unexpected connections and healing inspire you, make sure you're subscribed. I share one real story every single day, and you won't want to miss what's coming next.